So we must, as Gandalf says, begin at the beginning. And yes, the beginning of this particular Odyssey started just a few yards through that wall in the men's room. I was standing at the urinal doing what one does when one stands at urinals, translating Aristotle into Bulgarian. When I kind of sensed somebody walking behind me and going into the stall. A few seconds later, a voice emanates from the stall. "Mr. Guthrie, I have to ask you something." So I'm intrigued. Is there a suddenly detected toilet paper shortage in the stall? Is somebody else struggling with rendering the concept of telos into Bulgarian? Nope. The next line is, "Will you be my speech advisor?" Now, bear in mind, at this point, I don't know who's walked into that stall. But I said yes anyway. Then, of course, I had to hang out in the bathroom until the stall opened, so I found out who I had agreed to advise. And here we are. And it is a great pleasure to be here, not just to be here for Alex, but to be here for the entire Petrides family. They have been an important part of the PCDS community for many, many years. Sarah is here in the front row. Sarah was class of 15. Sarah and I went to New Zealand together. We experienced Bag End together. And I'm just delighted to find out a few minutes ago that she is now studying for a master's in public health. And as I said to her, the world needs more people who are doing public health. So I was a wee bit intrigued as to why Alex had asked me, and I figured I had to kind of get to know him a little bit better to figure this out. So let's start with the name. So Petrides, right? The first part's easy. Petros, right, is Greek and means rock. When in the Gospels Jesus says of St. Peter, "On this rock I shall build my church," that's a very, very deliberate pun. So that's why the main basilica in Rome is St. Peter's. Okay, so we have rock, and then Ides. Well, that was a little trickier. I had to go off and do some research. I thought I'd solved it. I found an ancient 6th century text in which Ides appears to be translated as "between the ears." At this point, I thought we were getting somewhere. But when you think you've solved a problem, keep looking, and you might find something different, right? And so I went further back to, like the 9th century BCE Mycenaean stuff, and I found it. Aha! Ides means "and roll." Which is very fitting. One of the wonderful qualities of the entire Petrides family is their loving of suitably wonderful types of music, most specifically the Grateful Dead. A band chiefly famous on the PCDS campus for the fact that one of their guitar players bears a truly uncanny likeness to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Martin. So I thought that what I was going to do was to make this entire intro just gently weaving Grateful Dead lyrics into everything I said. But the problem is that it's either really low-hanging fruit. He may be going to hell in a bucket, but at least he's enjoying the ride. Or just not working. Do you have any idea how hard it is to work casually into a sentence things like "in the transitive nightfall of diamonds"? So I thought I would just let my inspiration flow in token rhyme suggesting rhythm and see what came out. I also looked at all of Alex's teacher comments going all the way back to freshman. I did, yeah, all the way back to freshman year. And I saw one theme popping up again and again. Alex knows a bunch of really cool random stuff. And he also sometimes has difficulty getting things done on time. Now I understand why he chose me. Is there anybody on the PCDS campus that might possibly be described as knowing a whole bunch of random stuff and sometimes has difficulty getting things done on time? So now I'm starting to understand. And this knowing random stuff comes in handy sometimes. Alex was a very valuable member of the Quiz Bowl team back in the fall. He's also probably chiefly known around here for his love of baseball, of which I very much approve, because baseball definitely wins the contest for best American sport simply by being the American sport which is in fact closest to cricket. But I mean, baseball is just fascinating. You could spend a lifetime studying baseball. I can so see Alex in 30 years, being like an assistant general manager somewhere, hopefully not being fired for stealing signs, but working on, getting the analytic edge for his team. Now, compared to the rest of my faculty colleagues, I have an advantage. Because when it comes to writing speech introductions, I don't just have to rely on me. I get help for my speech introductions. Oh, yes. For those of you who are freshmen and haven't experienced this before, here we go. Dear Alex, Mr. Guffrey says you like to play baseball, and it's a game where one team hits the ball and the other runs after it. Can I be on the team that runs after the ball? I'd be good at that. What are you going to write your speech to the students about? Because when he wrote that, we didn't know. When I write to students, I don't do it at the last minute, because then I spell some words wrong. Don't write your speech at the last minute. I hope that you write a very good speech. Good luck, Bandit. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get those little paws to tap out the messages? So here he is, Alex Petridis. I'm really glad he's here. I'm really glad to introduce him. He is a wonderful young man. The last thing that I would need to say is this. Alex is going to talk about his personal experience. Okay? He is not making a claim, we are not making a claim that his personal experience is a universal experience. So if you have had an experience that departs drastically from Alex's experience, he's not saying you're wrong. He's not saying you did things wrong. Okay? We're not saying that. Different people have different experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Petridis.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, more commonly known as ADHD, is a mental disorder often characterized by the lack of an attention span and an inability to keep still. This is where most people's understanding of ADHD ends, but it's so much more than just being slightly aloof and fidgety. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 8 years old and was given a prescription 4 years later, one long-acting version every morning before school and one short-acting dose in the afternoon, if needed. The only thing I remember my parents telling me about this medicine was that it would help me focus. To this, I swiftly responded, okay, without asking a single question, not because I wasn't curious, but because I was a 12-year-old kid with ADHD and I wasn't paying attention. I took this medicine every day for school, from the beginning of 7th grade to the end of junior year, thinking the only thing it did was help me focus. Never once did I question what it was I was taking, how it worked, or if it had any other effect on me. Nor did I attribute my floundering grades, which had been getting worse and worse in 7th grade, to it. I thought it was just because the work was getting harder. Then one day last summer, after nearly failing out of school, I got curious and decided to do some research. After reading through tons of research papers on ADHD and its treatments, as well as personal anecdotes from people who struggled with the same issues I was facing, the connection between my prescription and my grades became apparent. There are two treatments for ADHD. The first is coaching. The second is medication. In my experience, coaching is where you waste a ton of money on appointments with a life skills coach who will tell you things you either already knew or could find out within the first 5 minutes of a Google search. Seriously, there are free websites, forums, and YouTube channels that are way more useful than some faux psychologist telling you to work smarter, not harder. But if it can help you, fantastic. Medication, on the other hand, actually does something. Medicines used to treat ADHD are stimulants. The American Addiction Centers defines them as a group of drugs that result in increased activity in the body. Stimulants range from the caffeine in your morning coffee to the cocaine and methamphetamine you added to your morning coffee to give it that little extra kick. To put in perspective where drugs like lisdextroamphetamine and amphetamine, more commonly known as Vyvanse and Adderall, fall in this category, the first sentence you see when you look up methamphetamine on Google is, "It can treat ADHD." These drugs work in part by increasing dopamine levels in the brain. For someone with ADHD, this will calm them down since they naturally have low levels of dopamine. For everyone else, however, it will make you bounce off the walls and cause your heart to beat to the tune of Flight of the Bumblebees. Dopamine deficiency is the main cause of ADHD's external symptoms. Constantly shifting focus and fidgeting are the brain's attempts to increase its dopamine levels. By raising it artificially, these symptoms are negated. Although this medicine did its job, it had other effects that I previously thought were my own personal flaws. The ADHD medication suppressed my creativity and imagination, which helped to lower my grades on papers involving creative writing. It also flattened my personality and made me unapproachable. This denied me the resource of peers to help me study and made me feel as if I was a failure if I asked for help from anyone, including my teachers. However, the most detrimental side effect was caused by that which the drug was prescribed to do, improve my focus. This is because ADHD has two distinct focus settings. The base setting is what I call the Space Cadet. During this time, my mind can jump from topic to topic, seemingly at random, and I have to often explain myself after saying something that everyone else thinks is completely irrelevant, but to me makes perfect sense. The other setting is ADHD's superpower, hyperfocus. During this time, I can become so focused on a task that everything else becomes background noise. It's not uncommon for me to practically be unresponsive when someone asks me something. I wasn't trying to ignore them. Their presence just didn't register with my brain. When I'm hyper-focused on something, it can be difficult to redirect my attention onto something else until the task I've started is complete. This mental state is amplified by stimulants, to the point where switching tasks is an impossibility. The most important things I learned during my research were from others who went through similar situations to mine. From them, I learned how to effectively use the medication to my advantage by starting work before it kicked in. Those of you with an afternoon prescription might resonate with this story. You come home, take your medication with the intention of finally working on that paper you were assigned 2 months ago. But since you just got home, you decided to relax and go on the computer. Cut to 12:30 a.m., and you're still on the computer, even though you're fully aware of the time. You think to yourself, just one more video. That's all, just one more video, and then I'll start on that paper. Eventually, you decide to give up and go to sleep out of disappointment and self-loathing. You made the mistake of not starting your work before the stimulant kicked in, so all of your focus was directed at the internet instead of that paper that you really should have written a month ago. The only effective way to use your medication is after you've begun your work. If you take it before you start, you're only making your life harder and more stressful than it needs to be. I also learned that it doesn't need to be taken every day and could be supplemented by caffeine if I needed help focusing. With this knowledge, I went into my senior year, not with mandatory medications that controlled my life, but with useful tools to be taken strategically when necessary. Last semester, I confirmed my hypothesis that the stimulants would hurt my grades, since they improved dramatically from the previous years. This was after I changed my prescription intake. I've started to open up to the rest of my classmates, which I was physically incapable of doing before, and overall, my mental well-being has improved greatly due to fewer panic-induced 3 a.m. writing sessions, if you don't count the speech, of course. Just because these medications didn't work for me doesn't mean they won't work for you. That's something you'll have to figure out for yourself. If you're taking a prescription of any kind, I urge you, please learn more about what exactly you're putting into your body. Everyone is affected differently by medicine, and you might find that yours has effects on you that you didn't know about, or you might find that it has no negative effects on you. And that's great. However, you might also find an alternative solution to your problem that works even better for you. In summary, do your own research and reap the benefits of the knowledge it brings you. Thank you.